gentlemen, welcome to Triway's Fall Play. We are proud to present Pride and Prejudice. We ask that you please silence all media devices and refrain from any flash photography. Sit back, relax, and we hope that you enjoy our show.
Oh, you're very punctual to your time, I see. Very glad indeed. Delighted to have the pleasure of receiving you all here at Longbourn. So, Bennet of Longbourn, eh? Right. Allow me to make you acquainted with my daughters. Come along, Jane. Miss Jane Bennet.
The eldest, though I cannot see why she must always have the chair nearest the window.
Hush, Lydia. Prettiest of all.
Mary, for goodness sake.
The next, Elizabeth.
Wittiest of all.
Though Captain Tally of the regiment expressed her to be the most critical young lady in all of Hertfordshire.
In the only complete sentence I ever heard him construct.
Law.
And book in hand as always, Mary.
The proudest. Pride is a very common failing. I believe, by all that I have ever read, I am convinced that it is very common indeed that there are very few of us who do not cherish a feeling of self-complacency on the score of some quality or other, real or imagining.
And last, but...
Pride and vanity are different things, though. The words are often used synonymously. A person may be proud without being vain. Pride relates more to our feeling of ourselves, vanity to what others may think of us.
Yes. Well said. And last, but not least, Kitty and Lydia, the youngest.
Are we to be only the youngest? Have we no qualities?
We are the best dancers with the prettiest hats.
And sing most charmingly. Well, I do.
My dear Mr. Bennet!
Mrs. Bennet, to be sure.
My dear Mr. Bennet, have you heard that Netherfield Park is let at last?
I've not.
Oh, what it is! For Mrs. Long has just been there, and she told me all about it.
Probably an elderly bachelor with a King Charles Spaniel.
Indeed! Mr. Bennet, do you not want to know who has taken it?
You want to tell me, and I have no objection to hearing it.
Mrs. Long says that Netherfield is taken by a young man of large fortune.
Really?
That he came down on Monday and was so delighted with it that he is to take possession before Michaelmas.
Married a single.
Lydia, we might first inquire the gentleman's name.
Bingley.
But married or single?
Oh, single, my dears, to be sure. A single man of large fortune, 4,000 or 5,000 a year.
It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a large fortune must be in want of a wife.
However, little known the feelings or views of such a man may be, this truth is so well fixed in the minds of the surrounding families that he is considered the rightful property of some one or others of their daughters.
Oh dear.
Oh, hush, Lizzie. What a fine thing for our girls.
How so?
That he might marry one of us, Papa?
And is that his design in settling here?
Design? Oh, nonsense, nonsense. But it is not unusual that a young man may fall in love.
Though he must be a soldier in a red regimental jacket.
You must visit him as soon as he comes.
I see no occasion for that. You and the girls may go, or perhaps send them by themselves. You're as handsome as any of the party, and if you do go, Mr. Bingley might like you the best of the bunch.
Well, I certainly have my share of beauty. But when a woman has 5 grown-up daughters, she ought to give over ideas of her own attractions.
And in those cases, those women have not much beauty to think of.
But consider your daughters. Think what an establishment it would be for one of them. You simply must go, for it will be impossible for us to visit him if you do not.
You are over-scrupulous for sure. I will write him a few letters by you of my hearty consent to him marrying whichever he chooses.
Mr. Bennet, you take delight in vexing me. You have no compassion on my poor nerves.
My dear, I have a high respect for your nerves. They are my old friends.
Oh, you do not know what I suffer.
But I hope you will soon get over it and live to see many men of 4,000 or 5,000 a year come in and out of the neighborhood.
It would be of no use to us if 20 such men should come, since you will not visit them.
My dear, when there are 20, I will visit them all.
protestations, Papa was among the earliest of those who waited on Mr. Bingley.
Captain Olivia, I hope Mr. Bingley will like it.
We are not in a way to know what Mr. Bingley likes, since we are not to visit.
It isn't fair, Papa. Really, it isn't. You forget we shall meet him at the assembly, and that Mrs. Long has promised to introduce him.
I do not believe that Mrs. Long will do any such thing. She has 2 nieces of her own.
And plain as cake, both of them.
She is a selfish, hypocritical woman, and I have no opinion of her.
Yes, but can we return to Mr. Bingley?
I say I am sick of Mr. Bingley.
My dear, why did you not tell me so before? If I'd known half as much this morning, I certainly would not have called on him.
Called on him? Called on him!
Oh, Papa!
Truly, Father?
Now, see what an excellent father you have, girls. But I knew I should persuade you at last.
Fear not that we've actually paid visits. Not escape his acquaintance now.
Come, Darcy. I hate to see you standing about in this stupid manner. You had much better dance.
You know how I detest it unless I am particularly acquainted with my partner. Your sister's engaged, and there's not another woman in the room with whom it would not be a punishment for me to stand up with.
I would not be so fastidious, as for you are but a kingdom. I have never met so many pleasant girls in my life, and several uncommonly pretty.
Your partner, the eldest Miss Bennet, is the only handsome girl in the room.
Ah, indeed, the most beautiful creature I've ever beheld. But there is one of her sisters, just there, whom I dare say is very agreeable.
She is tolerable, but that is insufficient to tempt me. Pray return to Miss Bennet. You are wasting your time with me.
I say, Mr. Bennet, we have a most excellent ball. Jane is so admired, and Mr. Bingley danced with her twice. Then the 3rd he turned to Maria Lucas, the 4th with Miss King, the 5th with Jane again, the 6th with...
My dear, if you had any compassion for me, I would not have danced half so much.
He is just what a young man ought to be. Sensible, good-humored, lively. And I've never seen such happy manners. So much ease, with such perfect good breeding.
He is also handsome, which a young man should be if he possibly can.
I can hardly explain to you the shocking rudeness of Mr. Darcy.
Well, then, how wise not to try?
I was very much flattered by his asking me to dance a second time. I did not expect such a compliment.
Did not you? Compliments always take you by surprise, and me never.
I can assure you that Lizzie loses nothing by not suiting that Mr. Darcy's fancy, for he is a disagreeable, horrid man.
But tall, my dear, tolerably tall.
You are too good, Jane. I swear, I've never heard you speak ill of another human being in your life.
I would not wish to be hasty in censuring anyone.
Your Mr. Darcy is so high and conceited that there is no enduring him. Lizzie not handsome enough to dance with. Oh, I quite detest the man.
I always speak what I think.
To have your good sense, to be so honestly blind to the follies and nonsenses of others.
Miss Bennet, might you consider a stroll about the room?
Within a short walk of Longbourn lived a family with whom we were particularly intimate.
Sir William Lucas, formerly in trade in Meryton, had made a tolerable fortune, and risen to the honor of knighthood.
And gives 2 balls a season.
Lady Lucas was a very good woman, and not too clever, which I find restful.
And their daughter, Charlotte, is my particular friend.
Truly an assembly ball is a paradise to me.
Occupied as you are observing Mr. Bingley's attentions to your sister, I think you do not suspect that you yourself have become, shall I say, an object of interest?
Indeed, where?
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my hearthed home. What's charming music for young people than a dance, eh? I find it a refinement of a Polish society.
Any savage can dance, sir.
Wait, sir, wait.
Do you not notice that Mr. Darcy seems always on the fringes of your conversation?
Mrs. Long told me he once sat close to her for half an hour without once opening his lips.
Miss Bingley told me that he never speaks much unless among his intimate acquaintances.
You waste the ball in idle chatter.
Note him.
He has an extremely critical eye, and if I do not begin by being impertinent, I shall soon grow afraid of him. Did you not think, Mr. Darcy, that I expressed myself uncommonly well just now, when I was teasing Colonel Forster to give us a ball at Meryton?
With great energy, but it is always a subject which makes a woman energetic.
My dearest Eliza, what are you not dancing? I'm sure Mr. Darcy will refuse to dance. Such beauty before me.
You must not suppose I moved this way in order to beg for a partner. You must not entreat I had any thought of dancing.
Might I have your hand for the next then, Miss Bennet?
Mr. Darcy, you are all but politeness, but I must decline myself the pleasure.
Miss Bingley?
Mr. Darcy, I can guess the subject of your reverie.
I should imagine not.
You're considering how insupportable it would be to spend many evenings in such society, and I'm quite enjoying.
Law, I once wore a gown with 12 ribbons and a double rosette.
The insipidity, the noise, the nothingness, and yet the self-importance of all of these people. What I would give to hear your strictures on them.
Your conjecture is totally wrong, I assure you.
Oh?
I've been meditating on the very great pleasure which a pair of fine eyes in the face of a pretty woman can bestow.
Truly, pray tell me what lady has the credit of inspiring such reflections.
Miss Elizabeth Bennet.
I confess, I am all astonishment. When did she become such a favorite? And pray, when am I to wish you joy?
I expected as much. A lady's mind can be very rapid. It can jump from admiration to love to matrimony in a moment.
Nay, I should consider the matter as absolutely acceptable.
Indeed, you are a scamp and a rogue, Sir William. You will make me laugh.
You have a charming mother-in-law, indeed. And you will have the pleasure of her being at Triway with you always.
Mr. Bennet, you must hear what this mischievous fellow is saying.
Miss Bennet, pray forgive even the appearance of unwanted attention, but might I request this reel?
Indeed, sir. It is rather an honor than a request.
It appears that Jane quite admires Mr. Bingley.
Noticeably, I would agree.
And Mr. Bingley likes your sister undoubtedly, though he may never do more than like her if she does not help him on.
But she does help him on, as much as her nature will allow.
My dear Eliza, he does not know Jane's disposition as you do. Though they meet tolerably often, it is never for many hours together. Jane should therefore make the most of every moment she can command his attention.
Your plan is a good one, Charlotte, where there is nothing in mind but the desire to get a rich husband. Jane has no such plans. She takes time, I believe, to study his character.
Well, I wish her success with all my heart, and if she had married him tomorrow, I should think she had as good a chance of happiness than if she had studied his character for a 12-month. It is best to know as little as possible of the defects of the person with whom you're to pass your life with.
You make me laugh, Charlotte. And you know full well you would never act in the same way yourself.
You are being watched.
Jane found herself in the receipt of an invitation from...
My dearest friend, if you are not so compassionate as to dine today with me...
We shall be in danger of hating each other for the rest of our lives. Come as soon as you can on receipt of this. We shall dine with my brother, as well as other gentlemen, and sundry officers.
Yours ever,
Caroline Bingley.
Officers, may Kitty and I go as well, Mamma?
We should like to meet the sundry officers.
Am I mistaken that there was but one name on the invitation?
May I have the carriage, Father?
Of course.
Indeed not. It would be much better, Jane, for you to go on horseback. For the weather looks ill, and you might have the good fortune to be thoroughly soaked, and stay longer with the Bingleys in ill health.
Mamma's hopes were answered. Jane had not been gone long when it began to rain torrents.
That was a lucky idea of mine, indeed.
For you, Liz, news from Netherfield, I think.
My dearest Lizzie,
I find myself to be very unwell this morning, but I suppose that is to be imputed on my getting wet through yesterday. The Bingleys will not hear of my return till I am better.
though excepting a sore throat and headache, there's not much the matter with me. Yours, Jane.
Well, my dear, if your daughter should have a dangerous fit of illness and die, be safe to know that it was all in the pursuit of Mr. Bingley, and under your instruction.
Oh, nonsense. People do not die of little trifling colds. And the inconvenience, Mr. Bennet, is worth the price.
She feels ill, and I will go to her.
Is this an intermediate sent for the horses?
The horses are wanted on the farm. I will walk. It is nothing when one has a motive, only 3 miles.
You cannot go jumping over stiles and arrive with dirty stockings.
Jane, at least, will forgive me, Mother.
Mr. Bennet?
Miss Elizabeth, how remarkably good of you to come.
A pleasure, Mr. Bingley. You can imagine my sister's letter gave me some cause for concern.
Of course. Miss Bennet has slept ill and, though up, is not well enough to leave her bed. I shall take you to her.
Lizzie, my dear Jane, you are flushed. Should not you be in bed?
I have sent for the apothecary. I would ask, Miss Bennet, that you remain at Netherfield until your sister is quite well.
Yes, do stay.
I will dispatch a servant to acquaint your family and return with any necessities.
Mr. Bingley, I cannot attempt to thank you.
Any thanks are far beyond the occasion. I have no pleasure in the world greater than to that of contributing to yours.
Well, he is most attentive.
Indeed he is. Jane, you look quite drawn, although I must say it serves you exactly for falling in with Mother's advice.
Lizzie, how did you get here?
The horses were wanted for the fields, so I walked.
Through the mud?
Through the mud, yes.
Or 5 miles, or whatever it is, above her ankles in mud, and alone, quite alone, what could she mean by it? It seems to me to show an abominable sort of conceited independence and complete indifference to decorum.
It shows to me an affection for her sister that is very pleasing.
I have a high regard for Jane Bennet, and I wish she were well settled, but with such a father and mother, and such low connections, I'm afraid there's no chance of it. They have an uncle who is an attorney in Meryton, and another who lives somewhere near Cheapside.
If they had enough uncles to fill all of Cheapside, it would not make them one jot less agreeable. Ah, Miss Elizabeth, a pleasure. Your sister improves, I hope?
She is resting, though hopes to not be thought unsociable.
Indeed not. I find it singular and intriguing that you prefer reading to cards, Miss Bennet.
Miss Elizabeth Bennet despises cards. She's a great reader with little pleasure in anything else.
I deserve neither such censure nor such praise. I am not a great reader, and I take pleasure in many things.
In nursing your sister you have pleasure, I am sure.
Hear, hear.
Is Miss Darcy much grown since the spring? How I long to see you a charming sister, such manners and so accomplished for her age.
It is amazing to me how young ladies can have the patience to be so very accomplished, as they all are.
All? My dear Charles, what do you mean?
Yes, Caroline, all. I have never once met a young lady without first being informed that she was very accomplished.
I fear I cannot boast of knowing more than half a dozen women, the whole range of my acquaintance, who are really accomplished.
Then you must have a great idea in your idea of an accomplished woman, sir.
She must have a thorough knowledge of singing, dancing, drawing, languages, a certain something in her air and manner, the tone of her voice, her address and expressions, or the word will be but half deserved.
And to all this, she must add something more substantial to the improvement of her mind through extensive reading.
I am no longer surprised at you knowing only 6 accomplished women. I now rather wonder at you knowing any at all.
I say, sister, perhaps you could take to the pianoforte and favor us with a lively Scotch air.
Splendid. And then perhaps Miss Bennet will seize the opportunity to show us a fling. Simple seeming, yet difficult in the execution. Will you essay, Miss Bennet?
Oh, I heard you before. You wanted me, I know, to say yes, so that you may take pleasure in despising my taste. But I always take delight in cheating a person of their premeditated contempt. I have therefore made up my mind to say I will not dance, and now despise me if you dare.
Oh, very sorry, Darcy.
And is Mr. Darcy not to be laughed at?
The wisest and best of men may be rendered ridiculous by someone whose first object in life is a joke.
Certainly, there are such people, but I hope I am not one of them. I hope I never ridicule what is wise and good. Follies and nonsenses, whims and inconsistencies do divert me, I own, and I laugh at them whenever I can. But I suppose these are precisely what you are without.
Perhaps it is not possible for everybody, but I have made it the study of my life to actively avoid those weaknesses which often expose one to a strong understanding of ridicule.
Such as vanity and pride?
Yes, vanity is a weakness, but pride, where there is a real superiority of mind, pride will always be under good regulation. I have faults enough, but they are not, I hope, of understanding. My temper I dare not vouch for it is far too little yielding and perhaps resentful. My good opinion, once lost, is lost forever.
That is a failing indeed. But you have chosen your faults well. I really cannot laugh at them. You are safe from me.
There is, I believe, in every disposition a tendency to some particular evil which even best education cannot overcome.
And your defect is a propensity to hate everybody.
And yours is willingly to misunderstand them.
And Jane and Elizabeth returned home. Mamma, I fear, was not very cordial to them.
I cannot, for the life of me, see, Elizabeth, why you had to rush Jane home.
I wasn't rushed, Mamma.
Well, I feel gratified. Opening conversations have lost much of their character, almost all their sense.
Mr. Bennet.
Oh, pooh.
My dear, I hope you've ordered a good dinner for the evening. I have reason to expect an addition to our normal dinner party.
Is it Mr. Bingley? Why, Jane, you never dropped a word of this, you sly thing.
It's not Mr. Bingley. It's my cousin, Mr. Collins, who, once I am gone, may turn you all out of this estate as soon as he pleases.
But why, Papa?
What's the entail, Kitty? Entail of which I often remind you. The inheritance of my property is limited to male heirs, and I, having produced none, Mr. Collins is the legal recipient. Now,
pray, do not talk of that odious man and this odious legality. It is monstrous that your estate should be entailed away from your own children.
Mr. Collins was punctual to his time.
Ah, Mrs. Bennet, Mr. Bennet. As a pastor of the Church of England, I flatter myself that my present overtures of goodwill are highly commendable, and that the circumstances of my being next in the entail of the Longbourn estate will be kindly overlooked on your part, and will not lead you to reject my proffered olive branch. As for your daughters, I have heard much of their beauty, but in the instance, they must fall short of the truth, and I doubt not seeing them, as I might say, to be well disposed of in marriage.
You are very kind, sir, and I wish with all my heart it may prove so, for else they will be destitute enough.
I am well aware of the hardships of my fair cousins, but I can assure the young ladies that I come prepared to admire them. At present, I will say no more, but perhaps when we are better acquainted. Thus, in conclusion, I can say that having a good house and a good living as a clergyman, I intend to marry, and in reconciliation with your family, I propose to choose one of your daughters. Surely you agree that this atonement is a generous one, with excellent and disinterested on my part.
Indeed.
I very much approve of your eldest.
Jane.
Yes, I conceive her both fetching and decorous. She should do quite nicely, and seniority must be served.
Jane. Sir, as to my younger daughters, I cannot take it upon myself to say, but I know of no predispositions. Concerning my eldest daughter...
Jane?
Jane.
Jane.
I feel incumbent to say that she is very likely to be soon engaged.
Oh, I see. And the next age?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, yes. Very forthright and not at all unpresentable.
Done.
To escape Mr. Collins' lectures,
On the high regard and moral fitness of the pastorate of the Church of England.
Papa suggested a stroll to Meryton.
For I fitted him more for a walker than a talker.
Indeed, one must first learn that the highest laws for the governance of a Christian duty.
and no sooner had I arrived at the regimental trumpetry than 3 ensigns bowed all at once,
And discover from within, not from without,
and all 3 asked me to walk out with them.
that no man can become a serviceable servant solely on written edicts and through the principles elucidated.
La, said I am but one young lady, as you can plainly.
When we soon espied
Yoo-hoo!
a newly arrived officer of the regiment,
Oh, yoo-hoo!
of most gentlemanlike appearance, who was introduced to us
By an officer already of our acquaintance as...
Mr. Wickham.
His appearance was greatly in his favor.
He had all the best parts of beauty,
A fine countenance,
a good figure,
and very pleasing address.
How do you do? This is a lucky chance indeed. At the officers' table, the Bennets are much spoken of and all of it approbation. Miss Catherine and Miss Lydia, are you not? Wrong way round?
Quite topsy-turvy.
Profoundly sorry. I hope to be correct in addressing you as Miss Elizabeth Bennet.
Indeed.
I solicit your further acquaintance, Miss Bennet.
Our society, sir, is not extensive. I venture we will meet again.
La, we were talking oh so very agreeably when the sound of horses drew our notice.
And Mr. Bingley and Darcy came riding by. Mr. Wickham barely touched his hat, which Mr. Darcy hardly deigned to return. What could be the meaning of it?
Before walking on, we naturally enjoined Mr. Wickham to pay us a visit.
With very great pleasure indeed. I fear we poor souls in the army lack greatly in feminine instruction. Miss Elizabeth.
Mr. Wickham.
La, but our sister has made a conquest.
Lydia?
I am very fortunate in my patroness, the nonpareil Lady Catherine de Bow, who's condescended to take me in hand. What beauty, what elevated style and affability. She is, of course, the proprietress of Rosings, and of very, 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 very extensive property. Although her daughter's indifferent health unhappily prevents her from being in town, which I told Lady Catherine myself has one day deprived the British court of its brightest ornament.
Absolutely splendid.
Mr. Wickham has arrived.
Mr. George Wickham, Papa.
Pleased?
Delighted.
Parson Collins, may I introduce Mr. Wickham?
Always a pleasure to meet a gentleman of the cloth. I had a near miss myself.
As Mr. Collins once again held forth.
I have more than once observed to Lady Catherine that her charming daughter seemed to be born a duchess, and that the most elevated rank, instead of giving her consequence, will be adorned by her. But to be brief,
Mr. Wickham suggested I show him around the grounds.
Please excuse my temerity in accepting your sister's kind invitation with an almost unbecoming alacrity.
It is a great kindness to seek us out. The regiment, I hope, is not unhappily quartered here.
I cannot speak for the regiment, but I may say that I am personally improved by acquaintance with your family.
A courtesy very prettily put.
And sincerely meant.
I could not help noticing, Mr. Wickham, a certain coolness of regard passing between yourself and Mr. Darcy.
You have a keen eye, Miss Bennet.
And a curious one, sir.
May you tell me how far Netherfield is from Meryton?
3 miles, perhaps.
Indeed. And how long has Darcy been staying there?
About a month. He is a man of very large property in Derbyshire, I understand.
His estate there is a noble one. In fact, I have been connected with his family through my infancy. Are you much acquainted with him?
I spent 4 days in the same house as him, and I find him to be an ill-tempered man.
I would believe your opinion of him in general astonish.
Really? He's not at all well liked in Hertfordshire.
May I express surprise? The world is perhaps blinded by his fortune and consequence, and sees him only as he chooses to be seen.
Well, I take him on my slight acquaintance to be an ill-tempered man.
I feel I have considerable knowledge of him. The late Mr. Darcy, his father, was excessively attached to me. I cannot do justice to his kindness. His son and I were born in the same parish, sharing the same amusements. My father was his father's estate manager. The elder Mr. Darcy knew the church ought to be my profession and promised me the family parish when it became available, or, if not, a voluntary chance of providing for me. Both were countermanded by young Darcy after his father's death.
On what grounds?
Had the late Mr. Darcy liked me less, his son might have warned me better, but his father's uncommon attachment to me irritated him. He had not attempted to bear the sort of competition in which we stood. In short, his behavior to me has been scandalous.
I had not thought Mr. Darcy as bad as this.
I do believe that almost all his actions may be traced to his considerable pride.
But could such abdominal pride as his have ever done him any good?
I must own him to be liberal and generous, display hospitality, assist his tenants, and relieve the poor. Family pride and filial pride have done this. His father's preference for me has pricked that pride and made him my enemy.
Mr. Bingley cannot know what he is. Do you know him?
Not at all.
He is a sweet-tempered, amiable, charming young man. He cannot know what Mr. Darcy is.
Mr. Darcy can please where he chooses. He does not want abilities.
Well, it is my opinion that he should be publicly disgraced.
Sometime or other he will be, but it shall not be by me. Miss Bennet, allow me to say that the troubling aspect of our subject has not made you a whit less delightful.
I suppose the relationship you described makes your presence at the coming ball at Netherfield an impossibility.
I should fear discomfort for all involved, but make no mistake, Miss Bennet, I keenly feel the loss.
Well, whatever he said was well said, and whatever he did, it was well done.
But dear sister, I am all astonishment and concern. I know not how Mr. Darcy could be so unworthy of Mr. Bingley's regard.
I can more imagine Mr. Bingley being imposed upon than Mr. Wickham would have meant such a history of himself.
But it is so distressing. One does not know what to think.
Pardon me, one knows exactly what to think.
I know only with certainty that poor Mr. Bingley would have much to suffer if Wickham's charge becomes public.
Poor Mr. Bingley?
I speak only as an observer.
When we received a personal invitation from the Bingleys, inviting us to the long-expected ball at Netherfield, which was set for the following Tuesday. Oh, and Mr. Collins held forth.
I am by no means of the opinion, I assure you, that a ball of this kind, given by a young man of character, can have any evil tendency, and I am so far from objecting to dancing myself, that I take this opportunity, Miss Elizabeth, in soliciting the first 2 dances with you especially.
And it struck me that I had been selected from among my sisters to become the mistress of Hunsford Parsonage.
Among those assembled, seeking the conquest of all that remained unsubdued of his heart.
I might title them dances of mortification.
Might I have the honor of your hand for the next, Miss Bennet?
Well, I hardly think.
Do not be a simpleton and allow your fancy for Wickham to make you appear unpleasant in the eyes of someone with 10 times his consequence.
Well then.
The music is well played, do you not think, Mr. Darcy? It is your turn to speak now, Mr. Darcy. I talked about the dance, and you ought to make a remark about the number of couples or the size of the room.
I assure you that anything you wish me to say will in time be said.
That will do for the present. We may be silent now.
Do you talk by the rule, then, when you are dancing?
Seen, Mr. Darcy, a great similarity in the turns of our minds. We are each an unsocial, taciturn disposition, unwilling to speak, unless what we think will be said will amaze the whole room, and be handed down with the eclat of a proverb.
This is no very striking resemblance of your own character, I am sure. How near it may be to mine, I cannot pretend to say.
I recently had the pleasure, Mr. Darcy, of meeting a childhood friend of yours, a Mr. Wickham.
Mr. Wickham is blessed with such happy manners as may ensure his making friends. Whether or not he is equally capable of retaining them is less certain.
And how unlucky he has to lose your friendship in a manner which he will suffer ill from all his life.
What think you of books, Miss Elizabeth?
I cannot think of books when I'm in a ballroom. My head is full of something else. You once told me, Monsieur Darcy, that your resentment, once created, was unappeasable. I suppose you are very cautious as to its being created.
I am.
And you never allow yourself to be blinded by prejudice.
May I ask to what these questions tend?
Merely to the illusion of your character. I'm trying to make it out.
And what is your success?
I do not get on at all. I hear so many differing accounts as to puzzle me exceedingly.
I could readily believe that reports may vary greatly with respect to me, and I would wish, Miss Bennet, that you would not sketch my character at present, as it would reflect no credit on either.
Ah, Mr. Darcy! You are, if I am not mistaken, the nephew of my eminent patroness, Lady Catherine de Bow, who secured me a living at Hunsford Parsonage. Thus, allow me to observe that I consider the clerical office as equal in point of dignity with the highest rank in the kingdom, provided that, of course, that a proper humility of behavior is at the same time maintained.
You have neglected your name, sir.
Have I?
You have.
Mr. Collins, sir.
Delighted.
Excellent. Most excellent. I have no reason, I assure you, to be dissatisfied with my reception. He answered me with the utmost civility, and upon the whole, I am very much pleased with him.
Though he forgot his name.
Did he?
Miss Eliza, I hear you are quite delighted with George Wickham. Oh yes, your sister Jane and I have been talking. Did you know he was the son of the late Mr. Darcy's steward?
I believe he's so certain.
Let me recommend you, however, as a friend. not to give implicit confidence to all his associates. As to Mr. Darcy's using him ill, it is perfectly false, for, on the contrary, he has always been remarkably kind to him.
Well,
George Wickham has treated Mr. Darcy in the most infamous manner. I do not know the particulars, but him coming into the country at all is the most insolent thing. Considering his descent, one could not expect much better.
his guilt and descent, madam, appear to be of yours one and the same. And I have heard you accuse him of nothing worse than being the son of his late father's steward, which I believe he so asserted.
I beg your pardon. Please excuse my interference. It was kindly meant.
Insolent girl.
You stuck it wonderfully.
Under your instructions, sir.
Now that displays the felicity which a marriage of true affection will bestow.
Ah, Miss Bingley, I can hardly enumerate on the advantages of such a match.
Mamma?
Such an advantage living but 3 miles apart, and such a comfort knowing how fond you are of our Jane.
Sadly, our carriage waits,
But
and we must go.
Miss Elizabeth, it is a great shame we footed it but once.
When at last the guests and officers quitted the house, Mamma spoke all the way home of preparations. New carriages, wedding clothes, and seeing Jane settled at Netherfield within 3 months. Oh, and Mr. Collins' marriage to Elizabeth as well.
May I hope, madam, for your interest in the matter of your penultimate eldest Elizabeth, for I solicit the honor of a private audience with her in the course of this morning.
what? Oh, yes, certainly, yes, of course. I am sure that Lizzie will be very happy, Mr. Collins. I'm sure she can have no objection. A private audience. Come, girls, I want you upstairs.
Oh, do not go.
Not go?
Mr. Collins must excuse me. He can have nothing to say to me that everybody need not hear. I'm going away myself.
Well, nonsense, Lizzie. I desire you stay where you are. Lizzie, I insist upon your staying and hearing Mr. Collins. Come, girls. Stay.
Your modesty only adds to your other perfections, for my attentions have been too marked to be mistaken. But before I am run away with my feelings, I shall enumerate my reasons for marrying. First, to set an example of matrimony in my parish.
Of course.
Secondly, it greatly adds to a man's well-being. And thirdly, by a particular recommendation and advice by Lady Catherine de Bow, my patroness, that to be an active, useful sort of person, able to make small income go a long way. Her very words. You may observe, fair cousin, that I cannot reckon the notice of Lady Catherine de Bow the least of my advantages. Your wit and vivacity, I think, must be acceptable to her, especially when tempered with the silence and respect in which her rank invariably excites. Fourth, as I am to inherit this estate after the death of your honored father, I feel bound to choose a wife from among his daughters, that the loss to them might be as little as possible. And now, Miss Elizabeth, nothing remains for me but to assure you in the most animated language of the violence of my affection. To fortune, I am perfectly indifferent, and as to dowry, I am well aware of your father's finances, and you may assure yourself that no ungenerous reproach shall ever pass my lips when we are married.
No.
No?
I am very honorable, Mr. Collins, in the ideas of your proposals, but I can do no otherwise than decline them.
Oh, It is usual for young ladies to reject at first the addresses of a man they secretly mean to accept.
Certainly, there are such young ladies, but I am not one of them. You could not make me happy, and I am sure I am the last woman who could make you so. And were your friend, Lady Catherine, to know me, she would find me in every respect ill-qualified. This being said, I think we can count this as finally settled.
Naturally, you cannot be serious in your rejection of me. Good sense and financial necessity forbid it. It is your wish to increase my love by suspense, according to the usual practice of elegant females.
I am not, Mr. Collins, an elegant female intending to plague you. I'm a rational creature speaking the truth of my own heart. I will not have you. Can I speak any plainer?
You are uniformly charming.
Ah, Mr. Collins, allow me to be the first to congratulate you.
She has begun delightfully, with a refusal.
A refusal?
Oh, the bashful modesty and the genuine delicacy of her character.
Mr. Bennett, you were wanted immediately. She is a headstrong, foolish girl who does not know her own interests.
Headstrong?
But I will make her know it.
Headstrong? Foolish? Oh, dear me. If so, it were better not to force her acceptance, because if liable to such defects of temper, she could not contribute much to my felicity.
Mr. Bennett, you must make Lizzie marry Mr. Collins, for she vows that she will not have him.
Pray, excuse me.
I'm afraid I have not the pleasure of
And
understanding.
Mr. Collins begins to say that he will not have Lizzie. Lizzie!
And what am I to do on the occasion?
Why, tell her you insist upon her marrying him.
Come here, child! Lizzie, is it true that Mr. Collins has made you an offer of marriage?
It is.
And this offer, you refused.
I have, sir.
Unhealthy alternative is before you, Elizabeth. If you do not marry Mr. Collins, you will never see your mother again. However, if you do marry Mr. Collins, you'll never see me again.
I tell you what, Lizzie, go on in this way, and you will never get a husband at all. And I am sure that I do not know who is to maintain you when your father is dead. Oh, Mr. Collins!
Please excuse me, but I wish to withdraw my pretensions to your daughter's favor. I have come to feel that her high spirits might not find their perfect expressions in the somewhat circumscribed life of the parsonage. I have certainly meant well, and if my behavior has been any way reprehensible, I hereby beg leave to apologize. I am resigned, but I hope improved. Resignation is never so perfect as when the blessing denied begins to lose its value in our estimation.
Miss Lizzie, I shall simply say that I will never speak to you again. And you will find me as good as my word. I have no pleasure in talking to undutiful children.
The discussion of Mr. Collins' offer was now nearly at an end, but rather than decamp in disarray, he made known
that he was always to have gone on Saturdays, and to Saturday he meant to stay.
and
The assiduous attentions paid to Lizzie were transferred to
Charlotte Lucas, who was visiting,
whose civility in listening to him was a seasonable relief to us all.
Jane, this has come from Netherfield.
From Netherfield.
Caroline Bingley says her whole party is leaving for town without any intention of coming back again.
I do not pretend to regret anything I shall leave in Hertfordshire, except your dear society, my friend. It is evident by this that Mr. Bingley comes back no more this winter.
It only means she does not think he should.
I will read you the passage in which particularly hurts me. I will have no reserves from you. Mr. Darcy is eager to meet his younger sister, and to confess the truth, we are scarcely less eager to meet her again. Georgiana has no equal for elegance, beauty, and accomplishments, and we shall dare entertain the hope of her being hereafter our sister.
Foolishness! She's a child!
Is it not clear enough? Does it not expressly declare that Caroline neither wishes nor expects me to be her sister, and that she is perfectly convinced of her brother's indifference to me? Can there be any other opinion on the subject?
There can, for mine is totally different. Will you hear it?
Most willingly.
It is this. Miss Bingley sees that her brother is in love with you, and wishes for him to marry Miss Georgiana Darcy. His inclination has been further suppressed by that of his friend, Mr. Darcy. He watched you most narrowly as you danced.
You must not criticize Lizzie. Perhaps I've imagined Mr. Bingley's regard. Women fancy admiration means more than it does.
And men take care that it should. His inclination has been suppressed, Jane, in conjunction with his friend.
Surely she only wishes his happiness.
Oh, she may wish a great many things besides his happiness, such as an increase in wealth, consequence, and great connections.
No, Lizzie, I will think no ill of him or his sister. Let me take it in the best light, in the light in which it may be understood. I have at least the comfort of knowing it has been no more than an error of fancy on my side, and that it has done no harm to anyone but myself.
You are too good, Jane. You wish to think all the world respectable. The more I see of the world, the more I am dissatisfied with it, and every day confirms my belief in the inconsistency of the human character that I've begun to distrust the appearance of either merit or sense.
You must not hinder your happiness on my behalf.
So, Lizzie, find your sister's cross of love. I congratulate her. Next to being married, a young woman likes to be crossed with love every once in a while. However, you will not long there to be outdone by her. Here are officers enough at Meryton to disappoint all the young women in the country. So let Wickham be your man. He's a fine fellow, and he'd jilt you creditably.
No, thank you, sir. A less agreeable man would satisfy me. We must not all expect Jane's good fortune.
Amazement. Within the very week, and as short as time as one of Mr. Collins' long speeches, all was settled between him and Charlotte Lucas by way of
domestic arrangement.
And Lizzie feels she solely accepted him from
the pure and disinterested desire of an establishment.
And as Mamma said,
cared not how that establishment was gained.
Unaccountable. Charlotte's marriage to Mr. Collins is in every view unaccountable.
My dearest Lizzie, do not give way to such feelings as these. They will ruin your happiness.
Married to Mr. Collins, my dear Charlotte, impossible.
Why should you be so surprised for me, Eliza? Do you think it impossible he might procure any woman's good opinion, though he wasn't so happy as to succeed with you?
No, but 2 offers of marriage in 3 days?
When you've had time to think it over, I think you will be satisfied for me. I'm not a romantic, you know. I never was. You must come and visit the parsonage as soon as you ever can.
And I tell you that Mr. Collins has been taken in. Worse, Elizabeth, I am sure, is the cause of all the mischief.
No.
I tell you, we are in a pitiable state. Because of the entail, Charlotte Lucas will be mistress of this house. And I will be forced to make way for her, and live to see her take my place in it.
Well, let us hope for more fortunate things. Perhaps I'll be the survivor.
In our gloom, Mr. Wickham's society was of material service, and his betrayal by Mr. Darcy was general knowledge. We all agreed that.
Mr. Darcy was the worst of men. On the following Tuesday, the Gardiners, my mother's brother, and his wife arrived. Mr. Gardiner is a gentlemanly-like man, and Mrs. Gardiner, as always, enlivened the premises by the distributing of presents, the speaking of the latest fashions, and of course, the giving of sage advice.
A young man such as you describe, Mr. Bingley, so easily falls in love with a girl within a few weeks, and just as easily forgets her. Now, as to Mr. Wickham, who you mention far too often, I would have you be on your guard.
Oh, he shall not be in love with me if I could prevent it.
Lizzie, do not involve yourself where the want for fortune shall make very imprudent.
At the present, I'm not in love with Mr. Wickham, but I count him as the most agreeable man I ever saw.
Unwise.
But how am I to know it is unwise? How am I to know that it would be wisdom to resist when so many of my fellow creatures attempt it? All I can promise you, my dear aunt, is not to hurry.
I say no more. I shall take Jane to London with me. Poor girl, a change of scenery is due. If it would have happened to you, Lizzie, you would have laughed yourself out of it sooner. I hear you are to visit the Collins in their newly married state. You must visit me as well.
Was to take me to Hunsford Parsonage. The idea of spending a night in London made the plan as perfect could be. My dear Jane, you look so well. London is agreeable to you.
Come, sit with me.
A pleasure.
I confess myself to have been entirely deceived in Miss Bingley's regard for me. She barely visited me here in London, and when she did, it was very evident that she had no pleasure in it. In fact, she seemed to come to convince me of her brother's interest in Miss Darcy.
All gentlemen are held in my lowest repute. It is said that Mr. Wickham is now the admirer of a certain Miss King.
Oh.
Whose most remarkable charm, might I add, is through the acquisition through family mortality of £10,000. And for him to direct his attention to her so soon after this event. Elizabeth, you are pale. Are you ill?
A man in distressed circumstances has not the idea of the elegant decorums which concern the rest of us. If she does not object to it, why should we?
Her not objecting to it does not justify him.
You know, I have a very poor opinion of the young men who live in Derbyshire, and their intimate friends in Hertfordshire are not much better. I am sick of them all. Thank heavens, tomorrow I will go to the Collinses, where I shall find a man with not one agreeable quality, but neither merit nor sense to recommend him. Perhaps stupid men are the only ones worth knowing it all.
Bravo. You must accompany Mr. Gardner and I on a tour of pleasures this summer, where we shall avoid the sex altogether and regard the landscape.
My dear aunt, what delight, what felicity! You give me fresh life and vigor, due to disappointment and spleen. What are men to rocks and mountains? All conspired for that of the traveller. The chairs comfortable, the weather delightful, and when we turned into the parsonage, we found that it was discernible by Mr. Collins and Charlotte appeared at the gate.
My dear Eliza, you are welcome and then welcome again. Do come in, you must be weird and jostled.
I have news of Lady Catherine's delicate consideration and civility in inviting us to dine at Rosings next night but one. Do not make yourself uneasy, fair cousin, about your apparel. Lady Catherine won't think the worse of you for being simply dressed.
exceedingly handsome, with every servant and each article of plate which Mr. Collins elaborately described.
You must not be surprised that Mr. Darcy will be in attendance tonight, bringing with him Colonel Fitzwilliam, the youngest son of his uncle.
It is my pleasure to introduce the Right Honourable Lady Catherine de Bourgh, whose wit, affability, and condescension make her the admired ornament of the British.
Yes, yes, quite so. I believe you are Elizabeth Bennet.
I am.
Your father's estate is entailed on Mr. Collins, I think. For your sake, I'm glad of it, but otherwise I see no occasion from entailing estates from the female line. A word, Mr. Collins.
Oh, Miss Bennet, I had not hoped to meet you here.
Nor I.
Allow me to present Colonel Fitzwilliam.
Your beauty, oft reported, exceeds Miss Bennet.
That has not been true, Colonel Fitzwilliam, in all quarters.
Miss Bennet, your family.
My family.
How many sisters have you, Miss Bennet?
I have 4 sisters.
That is a great many. Are you the eldest?
I am the second.
Are they handsome?
Indeed.
Do your sisters play and sing? Do you draw?
No, not at all.
What? None of you? That is very strange. Has your governess left you?
We never had a governess.
What? No governess? 5 daughters brought up in the same home without a governess? I've never heard such a thing. Your mother must have been quite a slave to your education.
Not perhaps as you might think.
Then who taught you? Who attended to you?
Those of us who wished to learn never wanted the means. Books were provided, and we were encouraged. Those who chose to be idle certainly might.
Aye, but that is what a governess will prevent. Had I known your mother, I would have advised her most strenuously to engage one. Are any of your younger sisters out?
Yes, ma'am. All.
All? All 5 out at once? Very odd. The young one's out before the eldest are married.
But really, ma'am, I think it should be very difficult among younger sisters to not have their share of society and amusement, just because the eldest may not have the means or inclination to marry early.
Upon my word, you give your opinion very decidedly for so young a person. Pray, what is your age?
With 3 younger sisters grown up, your ladyship can hardly expect me to own it.
What is that you are saying, Fitzwilliam? What are you telling Miss Bennet?
We are speaking of music, madame.
Of music, then pray, speak aloud.
I am reminding Miss Bennet of her earlier promise to favor us with the pianoforte.
Ah, yes, pray excuse me. I fear you will not find me a great proficient. Rather, continue your own conversations than attend to me.
I often tell young ladies that no excellence in music is to be acquired without constant practice.
Mr. Darcy, you move this way to intimidate me, but I should warn you that with every attempt to intimidate me, my courage always rises.
You could not really believe me to entertain any design in alarming you. I've had the pleasure of your acquaintance long enough to know that you occasionally profess opinions which are not in fact your own.
Your cousin will give you a very pretty notion of me, and then teach you not to believe a word of it. I would take care, Mr. Darcy, for such things may cause me to retaliate and say things that will shock your relations to hear.
I am not afraid of you.
Pray, let me hear what you accuse him of. I should like to know how such a paragon behaves among strangers.
The first time of my meeting Mr. Darcy was at a ball, where he refused to dance, and more than one young lady was in want of a partner.
I had not, at the time, the pleasure of knowing any woman in the assembly, and I am ill-qualified to recommend myself to strangers.
May we ask him why a man of sense and education who's lived in the world is ill-qualified to recommend himself to strangers?
I have not the talent of conversing easily with those that I have never met before.
That is fortunately not the case tonight. Strangely and unexpectedly, after our delightful evening at Lady Catherine de Bourgh's, the 2 cousins came often. Colonel Fitzwilliam came because he enjoyed Charlotte and I's society. But why Mr. Darcy came at all, well, it puzzled me exceedingly.
If you would not laugh to scorn me, Eliza, I might suggest the possibility of his being partial to you.
Mrs. Long says he'll sit close to her for half an hour without meeting her eyes, or opening his lips.
Ah, but he often looks at you quite appraisingly when your gaze is engaged elsewhere.
Stop. I'm going for a ramble in the park.
Ah, Miss Bennet.
Colonel Fitzwilliam. I did not know you ever walked this way.
Are you going much further?
I should have turned in a moment. Do you certainly leave for Kent on Saturday?
Yes, if Darcy does not put it off again.
I do not know anyone who likes doing more what they please than Mr. Darcy.
But so we all do. It's only that he has better means of having it than anyone else, and I'm at his disposal.
I should imagine as much. I wonder why he does not marry, as to secure a lasting convenience of that sort. But I suppose his sister does for the present, as she is under his sole care.
In fact, I'm joined with him in the guardianship of Miss Darcy.
Are you? I hope she will turn out well. She's at a most trying age, and if she has true Darcy spirit, she will have quite the character.
Indeed, she's one of the most tractable creatures in the world, and a great favorite of Miss Bingley. I think I've heard you say you know her.
I do. Mr. Darcy is uncommonly kind to Mr. Bingley.
From something Darcy said, I have reason to believe Bingley very much indebted to him. Although it's a circumstance which Darcy could not wish to be generally known, because if it were to get around to the lady's family, it would be an unpleasant thing.
You can certainly count on my not mentioning it.
I simply heard Darcy congratulating himself on having recently saved a friend from a most imprudent marriage. I could only suspect it to be Bingley, as his open nature might get him into a scrape of that sort.
And what does Mr. Darcy have to be dealing with his friend's partiality?
I think there were some strong objections to the lady's family. One was a country attorney, another was sort of a mercantile background, and perhaps an unsuitable mother. But this is all conjecture. Good day to you, Miss Bennet.
To Jane herself, there could be no objection. All loveliness and goodness she is. And my father, though he has some peculiarities, has abilities Mr. Darcy need not disdain. Of course, my mother. But Mr. Darcy would receive a deeper wound from the lack of sense of his friend's importance. He has been governed by the worst kind of pride, and partly from retaining Miss Darcy for his sister.
Miss Bennet.
Mr. Darcy.
Would it be suitable if I inquired of your health?
My health?
Yes, as I've not encountered you these past days, I thought that I had come and inquire of your health.
My health, Mr. Darcy, meets all the usual standards.
Ah.
Yes.
I am slow, even dilatory. Please, you must allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you. I fear dismay you. I should have declared myself at an earlier date. But there were, of course, the family obstacles which judgment always opposed to inclination, the general sense of your social inferiority, of its being a degradation of the line. I could not forget my responsibility to an estate, a way of life, and a pride of place which, given your circumstances, may disclude you, and thus the very ardency that I speak of took place against my will and reason, or rather in opposition to my character. But the very strength of my attachment has made it impossible for me to conquer my feelings, and I can only express the hope that these feelings will now be rewarded by your acceptance of my hand. There. I have spoken ill, but meant well, Miss Bennet.
It is, I believe, in cases such as this, the natural mode to express obligation for the sentiments avowed. It is natural that obligation should be felt, however unequally these sentiments shall be returned. If I could feel gratitude, I would now thank you, but I cannot. I have never desired your good opinion, and you've bestowed it upon me most unwillingly, and your feelings will have little disappointment after them that you have described.
And this is all the reply to which I am to have the honor of expecting. I might wish to be informed, however, why, with so little endeavored civility, I am thus rejected.
May I inquire why, with every view of offending me and insulting me, you choose to tell me you like me, against your will, against your reason, and even against your character? But I have other provocations. You know I do. You have been the means of ruining, perhaps forever, beloved sister. You separated Mr. Bingley and Jane from each other and put them into misery of the acutest kind. Can you deny that you have done it?
I have no wish to deny that I did everything in my power to separate my friend from your sister, and I rejoice in my success. Towards him, I have been kinder than towards myself.
Quite clearly said. But your character was revealed to me months ago in a recital with Mr. Wickham.
You take an eager interest in that gentleman's concerns.
And knowing his misfortunes, who wouldn't take an interest in him?
His misfortunes?
And of your affliction. You have withheld the advantages that you know must have been considered for him, yet you count the mention of his misfortunes with contempt.
And this is your opinion of me? I thank you for explaining it so fully. These bitter accusations might have been repressed had I, with greater policy, flattered you into the belief of my being impelled by pure, unalloyed inclination, but disguise of every sort is my abhorrence.
You cannot have, Mr. Darcy, made the offer to me in any mode that I would have been willing to accept. Your arrogance and selfish disdain for the feelings of others have built an immovable dislike. You are, Mr. Darcy, the last man in the world I could be prevailed on to marry.
You have said quite enough, madam. I perfectly comprehend your feelings. Please excuse me for having taken up so much of your time and accept my best wishes for your health and happiness in the future.
Any amount of money you have will help you. So just ask for an autograph and move on. They're free autographs. Okay?
The next morning, I awoke to the same thoughts that had kept sleep long at bay, and thus decided to see what air and exercise might do for my meditations.
Miss Bennet, I've been wandering in the grove quite some time in the hopes of meeting you. Will you do me the honor of reading this letter?
Two charges you last night laid to my offence. First, that I had detached Mr. Bingley from your sister. The other, that I had, in the defiance of honor, blasted the prospects of Mr. Wickham.
Ah, Miss Bennet, you are well known in Hertfordshire.
I had not been long in Hertfordshire.
Would you think me too forward if I applied for a second dance?
Before I observed my friend's behavior and perceived his most surprising partiality.
Your sister I also watched.
And though her manners were open and engaging, there was no symptom of warm regard or sentiment. She received his attentions, but remained to my eye indifferent.
My objections to the marriage proceeded also from other causes of repugnance. Your family's want of propriety, portrayed by your mother's manners, your younger sister's forwardness, and even, forgive me, your father's misplaced wit, all confirmed my sense
that I must preserve my friend from a most unhappy connection.
In London, I found his sister's uneasiness,
Has been greatly excited.
and we were alike sensible that no time should be lost in detaching him.
Bingley has a great natural modesty, with a stronger dependence on my judgment than on his own.
To convince him that he had been deceived was not difficult.
On this subject, I have nothing more to say, and no apology to offer.
With respect to that other, more weighty accusation of having injured me with Mr. Wickham, that I will attempt to refute.
In short, his behavior to me has been scandalous.
My father was not only fond of this young man's society, but hoped the church would be his profession.
And intended to provide for him in it. He would situate him at the family parsonage and provide a legacy of £1,000. On my father's death, Mr. Wickham wrote to inform me that
I resolved to pursue study law, for which £1,000 would be insufficient. I hope you shall not think it unreasonable for me to expect a more immediate pecuniary advantage.
the business was soon settled. He resigned all claim to assistance in the church.
And accepted in return £3,000. 3 years later, he applied to me again, having found the law an unprofitable study, and being then again resolved to be ordained.
This must be false. This cannot be. He assured me his circumstances were...
exceedingly bad.
Indeed, on both sides, this is only an assertion. Yet every line confuses my belief in Mr. Darcy's infamy.
You will hardly blame me for refusing his entreaty, and his resentment was so great
You betray your father's wishes and your own honor, sir.
that every appearance of acquaintance was dropped.
Last summer, he again most painfully obtruded on my notice. My sister, Georgiana, for whom Mr. Fitzwilliam and myself were mutual guardians, was taken from school at her wish and established in London. Mr. Wickham, by convenience, recommended himself to her.
Ah, Miss Darcy, it is my pleasure to renew your acquaintance.
She was then but 15 and persuaded herself to be in love and consented to an elopement.
Fortunately, regarding me as almost a second father, she confessed her plans.
You may imagine what I felt and how I acted.
I wrote to Mr. Wickham in undisguised heat, and he left London immediately and alone. His chief object had unquestionably been my sister's fortune of £30,000, and the hopes, I think, of revenging himself upon me.
In this light, his attentions to Miss King seem solely and hatefully mercenary.
This, madam, is a faithful narrative of every particular. If your abhorrence of me should make my assertions valueless, I direct you to Colonel Fitzwilliam, also guardian of Georgiana, who is fully aware of everything described above.
I will only add, God bless you. How despicably, how humiliating in this. Yet, how just humiliation. If I had been in love, I could not have been more wretchedly blind. But vanity, not love, has been my folly. In the terms of my family so mortifying, the shame is severe, but the charge strikes too forcibly for denial. My mother puts herself out beyond all expectation. My father does nothing to control the self-willed carelessness and giddiness of my younger sisters. Only excepting dear Jane, what can I call them all but ignorant, idle, and vain? How despicably I have acted, I, who have prided myself on my discernment, and till this moment, I never knew myself. I'm glad you're back, Lizzie.
If you had any flirting, I was in great hopes you would have gotten a husband before you got back.
Our sisters have been more than ordinarily silly.
Oh, pooh. Aunt Philip says Lizzie had better take in Mr. Collins, but I do not think there would have been any fun in that. Jane will be quite an old maid soon. Lord, how I should like to be married before any of you, and then I could chaperone you about to all of the balls. Kitty and I have been to the shops.
I do wish you had gone with us, Mary, for we had such fun. We talked and laughed so loud anybody might have heard us. 10 miles off. Far be it from me, my dear sisters, to depreciate such pleasures. They would have no charm for me. I shall infinitely prefer a book.
Look here, I have bought this bonnet. I do not think it is very pretty, but I thought I might as well buy it as not.
You see?
Oh, but there were 2 or 3 much uglier in the shop, and when I have gotten some prettier colored satin to trim it with fresh, I think it will be very tolerable.
Sister, I'm heartily sorry that Mr. Darcy should have delivered his sentiments in a manner so little suited to recommend them. But I grieve for the unhappiness your refusal must have given him.
You do not blame me, however, for refusing him.
Blame you? Oh, no. But Wickham's so very bad. It is almost past belief. How very unfortunate that you should have used such strong language when speaking of Wickham to Mr. Darcy, for now they do appear wholly undeserved.
Well, Lizzie, what is your opinion now of this business of Jane's?
My belief.
He is a very undeserving young man. I do not believe he shall ever get him now.
Mamma.
Well, my comfort is that I am sure that Jane will die of a broken heart, and then he will be sorry for what he has done.
News, ecstatic, delicious, wonderful news.
Here in the regiment would leave for Brighton.
I thought my heart should have broken.
My heart.
Mine. But oh, Mamma, I have received an invitation from Mrs. Foster, wife of the colonel of the regiment, to accompany her to
Brighton.
To Brighton.
And I should not see her, I should not be asked as well.
Shan't.
Shall.
You confuse your steps to the Danse Espagnole, and you have but one dress for the new season, and that an unsuitable green.
Lydia will never be easy in her present environment until she's exposed herself in some public place or other. It can never be with such little expense or inconvenience to a family.
Oh, Papa! Are you aware, sir, of the very great disadvantage that will arise from Lydia's imprudent manner? Nay, which has already arisen from it.
What, has she scared away a few of your lovers?
I have no such injuries to resent, but if there is no check on her exuberant spirit, she shall soon be beyond the reach of amendment.
Oh, pooh.
Yes, pooh. And Kitty will follow wherever Lydia leads.
Papa has said I may. Indeed, a visit to Brighton comprises of every possibility of earthly happiness.
Where you may play the common flirt among 6 officers at once.
I tell you all, I shan't, Dinah, ever leave my room.
So no peace in Longbourn! Lydia does not go to Brighton.
Mr. Wickham has arrived to say his goodbyes, as his regiment tomorrow decaps for Brighton.
Oh, but Mr. Wickham, I will not say my goodbyes, for Papa has agreed I may accept Mrs. Foster's invitation for an extended visit.
It will be my pleasure, if asked, to introduce you in Brighton and share the town's historical views. Miss Bennet.
Mr. Wickham.
Am I in disgrace, Miss Bennet?
I do not rightfully understand you, Mr. Wickham.
I've always admired your understanding.
Have I mentioned I met Colonel Fitzwilliam and Mr. Darcy at Rosings? You know Colonel Fitzwilliam, I believe.
In passing, you saw Mr. Darcy frequently?
Yes, almost every day, and I say his personality improves on acquaintance.
Is it in address he improves? For I dare not hope he's improved in essentials.
I mean that from knowing him better, his disposition was better understood.
I must hope that he can even assume the appearance of what is right, for it must deter him from such foul misconduct as I have suffered by. But I fear I must leave you. We are on the march. A last word on Mr. Darcy. His manners, being in a state of improvement, imputed with affability, I imagine the daughter of Lady Catherine de Bow, may be imputed to his wish of forwarding with the daughter of Lady Catherine de Bow.
Acquaintances wrapped a cloak of gloom and disinclination around our domestic circle.
Lydia has promised to write very often, but her letters are always very short.
Where such and such officers had attended them, where she had seen such beautiful ornaments.
And how she's purchased another new gown and another new parasol.
And my constant hope of a tour to the lakes with the gardeners was now the object of my happiest thoughts. A tour to the lakes could be very exciting, you see. As a tour to the lakes, well, it gets me away from Longbourn, where I do not have to think much of Mr. Darcy, and I do not have to see how much that Jane suffers from Mr. Bingley leaving.
My dear Elizabeth, our trip to the lakes must be curtailed to some extent due to Mr. Gardiner's business. We must give up the lakes and substitute for a more contracted tour. Have you set your hearts on the lakes?
I too own they were an attraction.
I fear we are confined to Derbyshire, though it leads us the delights of Warwick, Kenilworth, Lambton.
Oh, Pemberley.
The Darcy estate?
Yes, I recall.
If it was a fine house richly furnished, I should not care about it myself, but the grounds are delightful.
The grounds, yes, but is the family not down for the summer?
Indeed not, you goose, for this summer in London. Elizabeth?
The journey was, the scenery splendid, and when we turned in at Pemberley Park, we found that it was quite large.
Contains quite the variety of ground.
Glorious woods.
Hey!
Woods!
Ah, and a good stream for fishing.
I own, I had never seen such natural beauty, so little contradicted by that of an awkward taste.
Whoa there, Alexander.
Very welcome. The master is of course absent, but we expect him here tomorrow with a large party of friends. We are always instructed to show the house if you would like.
Most kind indeed.
Your master much at Pemberley, is he?
Not as much as we could wish, sir.
Ah, yes. How about the stream, eh?
Please to step in. That there above the grand fireplace is my master, drunk perhaps 8 years ago.
In what a light does this place him? Though, Lizzie, you can tell us whether it is like or not.
Does the young lady know Mr. Darcy?
I do.
Do you not think him a very handsome gentleman, ma'am?
Yes, very handsome.
He is the best master to have ever lived. I have never had a cross word from him in my life.
Mr. Darcy, you mean?
Yes, ma'am. Go as you please, see what you like.
In what an admirable light does this place him, though not quite consistent with his behavior to our poor friends.
My dear aunt, we may be deceived. Perhaps we may view the grounds.
Ah, with great pleasure. The grounds, the lawn, the river, all in harmony with the buildings. I am quite swept away.
Oh,
Ah,
Miss Bennet, this is a most welcome surprise.
most welcome indeed.
May I inquire of your well-being and that of your family?
In all regards, well.
I am pleased to hear so. Would you do me the honor of introducing me to your friends?
Mr. and Mrs. Gardner, may I present Mr. Darcy?
Charmed.
Delighted.
My uncle and aunt.
That, of course, only adds to the honor.
Wonderful stream, Mr. Darcy. Capital angling, I suspect.
Quite satisfactory, Mr. Gardner. Should you continue in the area, please do me the pleasure of fishing here as often as you choose. I could easily provide for you the requisite tackle and direct you to those parts of the stream where there is usually most sport.
Hey?
Best sport.
Ah, most generous. I look forward to it.
Very generous indeed.
Please exempt our forwardness in walking the grounds. Your housekeeper certainly informed us you would not be in till tomorrow.
I have preceded my party in order to arrange their comforts. Among them are some who will claim acquaintance with you, Mr. Bingley and his sister, and one who more wishes to be known to you. Is it asking too much for me to introduce my sister to you during your stay at Lambton?
I am delighted by the compliment.
Ah.
Yes.
Well, he's perfectly well behaved, polite and unassuming.
There's something a little aloof in him, to be sure, Lizzie. He's not handsome, but his features are perfectly good. Why do you tell us he's so disagreeable?
Well...
Hey?
Disagreeable!
Oh, indeed not. At the worst, a little whimsical in his civilities.
The meetings and introductions suggested by Mr. Darcy took place 2 days following, and excited my lively attention. I had conceived, you might say, a suspicion of Mr. Darcy and my niece, which on occasion grew to a full conviction that one of them at least knew what it was to love. Of Lizzie's sensation, I remained a little in doubt, but that the gentleman was overflowing with admiration was evident enough.
Thus, my dearest Jane, in speaking of your supposed rival, Miss Bingley, I saw no looks between her and your supposed rival, Miss Darcy. I saw no looks between her and Mr. Bingley that spoke of any particular regard. Miss Bingley continues in her dislike of me. Miss Darcy was greatly civil, but very shy.
Come for you, miss.
Oh,
Thought you might be wanting it.
news from Jane, and very welcome.
Brought it to you, then.
My dearest Lizzie, something has occurred of the most serious and unexpected nature.
Colonel Forster has informed us that Lydia has run off to Scotland with one of his officers. To own the truth, Lizzie, it is with Wickham.
Worse still,
Imprudent as a marriage between our poor Lydia and Wickham would be.
We are now frantic to be assured that it has taken place at all, for we now hear they have not gone to Scotland, but to London.
And Colonel Forster...
Piers Wickham is not a man to be trusted.
Father has gone to London to try to discover them, and what he means to do, I know not.
He shall shoot the scoundrel through the heart, and we shall all be ruined.
I do, and I cannot help, Ernest, begging you to come as soon as possible.
where is my aunt? I must find her this moment on business that cannot be delayed.
What is the matter?
I have not an instant to lose.
You cannot go yourself. I will send a servant. A glass of wine, shall I get you?
No,
You are very ill.
No, thank you. Only dreadful news. My younger sister has left all her friends and has eloped under the power of Mr. Wickham. You know him too well to doubt the rest. She is lost forever.
I am grieved, shocked, but is it absolutely certain?
Certain. My father has gone to London and Mr. Gardiner will assist, but how is such a man to be worked on? How are they even to be discovered?
If there is anything
Most
that
kind.
would to heaven that anything could be said or done on my part that might offer consolation to such distress.
Pray, apologize to Miss Darcy for us.
Dear me, your company seems to have left the grounds in disarray.
Your pardon?
How very ill Miss Eliza Bennet looked this morning. I have never seen someone so much altered since the winter. She's grown so brown and coarse.
That is, perhaps, no miraculous consequence of traveling in the summer.
I particularly recollect your saying one evening, she a beauty, I would soon call her mother a wit. But afterwards, she seemed to improve on you. I believe you thought her rather pretty at one time?
Yes, but that was only when I first met her, for I now consider her the handsomest woman of my acquaintance.
Oh.
I saw no looks that Lydia had any partiality for Mr. Wickham, only that she longed for the encouragement to attach herself to anybody. What a mistaken indulgence towards such a girl, a father absent, a mother incapable of assertion. It is all my fault, knowing what I did of Mr. Wickham, and I had not the foresight to make the knowledge public. Has anything been heard of the fugitives?
Not yet, but now that my dear uncle has come, I hope all will be well.
Is father in London?
Yes, he went on Tuesday.
If I had been able to carry my point in going to Brighton with all the family, this would never have happened.
Mother!
Why did the Forsters let her out of their sight? And now, Mr. Bennet will fight Wickham wherever he meets him. I do not know what we shall do. Not know what we shall do!
quite a useless alarm. I shall go to London, call my brother-in-law, and we shall consult together what is to be done.
This is a most unfortunate affair. However, we must stem the tide of malice and pour into the wounded bosoms of each other the balm of sisterly coalition. You see, Mary thinks it's all a book. Lydia wrote saying that if we knew where she was going...
You would laugh. What a good joke it will be when I write to Mamma and sign my name Lydia Wickham. I hope you will drink to our good Jenny.
Thoughtless Lydia. But at least it showed she was serious in the object of her journeys. Whatever he might have afterwards persuaded her to do, it was not on her part a scheme of infamy. My poor father, how he must have felt it.
I never saw anyone so shocked. He could not speak a word.
Mr. Bennet shocked? Indeed. I was taken ill immediately. I had to be carried to my room. Twice.
Oh, Jane. Father!
Mr. Bennet! Dear Mr. Bennet!
My dear father, what you must have endured.
It's been my own doing. I ought to have endured it.
You must not be so severe upon yourself.
No, Lizzie, let me for once in my life, let me feel how much I have been to blame. Perhaps I'll just defer till Kitty runs away.
I'm not going to run away, Papa. If I should ever go to Brighton, I should behave far better than Lydia. Do you suppose them to be in London?
Well, yes, or else could they be so well concealed?
Father, from Uncle Gardner in London.
Indeed, I have palpitations.
I've seen them both.
Hey, Kevin.
Nor can I find there is any intent of being so. However, I hope it is not long before they are.
Not long! See there! She is a good girl! Not long!
Mrs. Bennet.
All that is required of you is to assure your daughter, by settlement, her equal share of the £5,000 secured amongst your children after your decease.
And entering into an engagement of allowing her, during your life, £100 a year.
Is it possible? Could it be possible he would marry her?
So Wickham is not so undeserving as we had thought him.
But the terms, I suppose, must be complied with.
Indeed! You must write him on the moment, Mr. Bennet. They must marry!
And write I will, but there are two things I'd very much like to know. One, how much has your uncle laid down, and how am I ever to pay him?
Money, my uncle. What do you mean, sir?
I mean that no man in his senses would marry Lydia for anything fathering less than £100 in my life and 50 after I'm gone.
And Mr. Gardner could pay such a sum.
Indeed he could not, nor I repay him.
You must write, Mr. Bennet. Inscribe this minute. Oh, this is delightful indeed. She will be married. I shall see her again. My good, kind brother. I long to see her, and dear Wickham too.
Dear Wickham?
But the clothes, the wedding clothes. We must see to it. I will make all the arrangements myself. My dear Lydia, how merry we shall be together when we meet. Calico, muslin, cambric, I will manage it all.
Mr. Gardner wrote that Wickham had resolved on quitting the militia, but would now enter the regular army under the command of General Trott, now quartered in the north. After our sister's wedding day, the couple returned to Longbourn, and the family assembled to receive them.
Congratulate me, dear sisters. It has been a great while since I have been here. Good gracious, when I went, I am sure I had no idea of getting married, though I thought it would be very good fun if I had. Dear Jane, I now take your place, and you must go lower, for I am a married woman. And what do you think of my husband? Is he not a charming man? All of my sisters must go to Brighton, for that is the place to get a husband.
I thank you for your share of the favor, but I do not particularly like your way of getting husbands.
Ah, you are so strange, but I must tell you how it went off. We were married, you know, in St. Clement's, because Wickham's lodgings were in that parish, and it was settled that we should all be there by 11 o'clock. Well, just as the carriage arrived, my uncle was called away on business, and I was so frightened that the wedding must needs be put off. But then I recollected that Mr. Darcy should do as well to give me away.
Mr. Darcy? Give you away?
Oh, yes, he was to come there with Wickham, you know. Oh, but I quite forgot. It was to be such a secret.
If it was to be such a secret, then say not another word.
Certainly, we will ask you no questions.
Indeed, for then I should tell all, and Wickham would be quite angry with me. Coming, Mamma!
suspicions concerning Mr. Darcy correct?
Lizzie, indeed, if you are so innocent and ignorant, I must be more explicit.
Oh dear.
Mr. Darcy called to tell Mr. Gardner he had found where Wickham and your sister were. He said it was his owing that Wickham's worthlessness was not yet well known. He called it his duty to remedy the evil caused.
But not brought on by himself. Lydia!
Lydia, indeed. He called on her, but found her resolved on remaining.
Lydia would be Lydia still.
He asked why he did not marry your sister at once.
Because we are not rich.
Yes, unfortunately, Wickham still cherished the hope of making a fortune by marriage in another country. So Mr. Darcy then settled upon him a large sum for his acquaintance.
I knew it.
And made Mr. Gardner acquainted with it. Elizabeth, where are you going?
To tell father.
Lizzie, this can go no farther than you or Jane at most. Mr. Darcy wants neither the act or sum known.
But you have told me.
Yes, I have.
Ah, Miss Bennet, I fear it interrupts your solitary babble.
You do, yes.
Ah,
But it does not follow that the interruption should be an unwelcome one.
I should be sorry indeed if it were. I find from your aunt you've seen Pemberley.
I have.
And the old housekeeper, I suppose.
Yes.
And what did she say?
That you had gone into the army and she was afraid had not turned out well.
I see. Did Darcy introduce you to his sister?
He did.
And do you like her?
Yes, very much so.
I hope she will turn out well.
I believe she will. She has gotten over the most trying age.
You think ill of me, do you not, Miss Elizabeth?
I am very glad, Mr. Wickham, that you have married my sister. How should you have liked making sermons?
Exceedingly well, but it was not meant. I will leave you to your thoughts.
Come, Mr. Wickham. We are now brother and sister, and I hope in the future our minds shall always be one.
You are a generous spirit, sister.
Well, he's as fine a fellow as I ever saw. He simpers and smirks and makes love to us all.
I often think there is nothing so bad as parting with friends. One seems so forlorn without them.
This is the consequence, madam, of marrying a daughter off. Makes you better satisfied with the other four single.
Mr. Bingley is coming down, Mamma.
Oh, wonderful news! I mean, he is nothing to us, and I am sure that I never want to see him again. But he is welcome to Netherfield. And who knows what might happen?
I can assure you that the news does not affect me with either pain or pleasure.
Well, if he wants our society, let him seek it. He knows where we live.
But you will wait on him, of course.
No. I'll not spend my hours waiting on our neighbors every time they go away and come back again.
I begin to worry that he comes at all. I could see him with a perfect indifference, but I can hardly bear to hear it thus perpetually talked of. Mother means well, but she cannot know. No one can know how much I suffer from what she says.
If I could do anything to help you, I would. But it is wholly out of my power.
Mr. Bingley is into the paddock, and he's riding towards the house.
Do you contradict yourself with a smile of expectation?
Let me see first how he behaves, then it will be early enough for expectation. And there's a gentleman with him, Mamma.
Some acquaintance or other. I am sure I cannot know him, my dear.
La, it looks like that Mr. What's-his-name, that tall, proud man.
Good gracious, Mr. Darcy. And so it does, I vow. Well, any friend of Mr. Bingley's will be welcome here, to be sure. But else, I must say I hate the very sight of him.
Ah, Mr. Darcy. The gentlemen were received with a propriety of behavior I thought equally free from any symptom of resentment or unnecessary complacency.
It is a long time, Mr. Bingley, since you went away.
Good gracious, yes. Far too long, in my own opinion.
I began to be afraid that you would never come back again.
Mrs. Bennet.
Miss Lucas is married and settled, and one of my own daughters.
A matter for the greatest of congratulations.
It is a delightful thing, to be sure, to have a daughter well mannered. Mr. Wickham has taken her up to Newcastle with his regiment, a place too far northward, in my estimation.
Indeed. Excellent shooting this season, eh, Darcy?
When you have killed all of your own birds, Mr. Bingley, I beg you will come here and kill all of ours. You were on visit in my debt, Mr. Bingley. For when you went to town last winter, you promised that when you'd come back, you would take a family dinner with us. I have not forgot, you see. I was very disappointed when you did not come back and keep your engagement.
To be remedied at the first opportunity, eh, Darcy?
You've been quite silent, Mr. Darcy. I hope you're well.
I am quite well. Very well.
And then they went away. Why, if Mr. Darcy came to be silent, grave, and indifferent, why did he come at all?
Now that this first meeting is over, I feel perfectly easy. Obviously, we met only as common and indifferent acquaintance.
Oh, Jane, take care.
My dearest Lizzie, you cannot think me so weak as to be in danger now.
I think you are in very, very great danger, as of making him as much in love with you as ever. A man who has been once refused. How foolish am I to expect a renewal of his love? Is there one among the sex who does not protest to a second proposal to the same woman? It is these feelings of adherence that are so adherent to their own feelings.
Mr. Bingley called again on Friday.
Once set upon this road to happiness, there was nothing on the side of prudence to stop him or make his progress slow.
And yet again the following Tuesday.
She was too good for him. But as no one minds what is having what is too good for them, he was earnest in the pursuit of blessing.
And yet again Thursday a week.
I begin to think there is something in this, Jane.
An encouragement from Jane could not be long wanting.
Mr. Bingley has come and he looks quite serious.
Ah, Mr. Bingley. What a memorable surprise.
What is the matter, Mamma? What do you keep winking at me for?
I did not wink at you. Come, Kitty, I want to talk to you.
Mr. Bingley, you write excellently.
Elizabeth, I very much wish to consult you as to the... Well, I want to talk to you.
Miss Bennet, I say, might I venture your given name?
Indeed you might, if I might venture yours.
Oh, smash it. Top of the hill, really. My dear Miss Bennet, I wish to express how very great my esteem is for you.
I see.
By goodness, esteem won't do. I must say affection. I really must. My dear Miss Bennet, Jane, will you do me the honor of...
Yes, I will, and with a very full heart. But before a fuller expression, you might prefer a word with my father?
Your father, yes. Oh, this is smashing. Top of the hill, really. I will speak to him, if available, this very minute. Promise me you won't move so much as a ribbon.
I will endeavor to be very, very still. Oh dear,
Lizzie! Lizzie, what?
By far too much. I do not deserve it. Oh, why is everybody not this happy?
A catch! A veritable catch! I am ecstatic!
You're a good girl, Jane. I have no doubt you're doing well together. For each of you so complying that nothing will ever be resolved. You're so easy that every servant will cheat you, and so generous you will always exceed your income.
Exceed their income? My dear Mr. Bennet, what are you talking of? Why, he has 4,000 or 5,000 a year, and very likely more.
Oh, Lizzie, why am I thus separated from my family and blessed above them all? If I could but see you as happy.
If you were to give me 40 such men, I could never be so happy. till I have your disposition, your goodness. I can never have your happiness. No, let me shift for myself, and perhaps, if I am very lucky, I shall meet again with another Mr. Collins in time.
Indeed.
Mamma, I have no notion how to proceed. It's Lady Catherine de Bourgh come to call.
No!
Yes.
I am astonished beyond all expectation.
I have shown myself in.
Well,
Lady Catherine, you are most welcome.
I hope you're well, Miss Bennet. That lady, I suppose, is your mother.
Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, may I present Lady Catherine de Bourgh?
And these, I suppose, are your sisters.
Yes, madam. My youngest of all is recently married, and...
This must be a most inconvenient sitting room for the evening in summer. The windows are full west.
Oh, indeed! We never sit here after dinner, and...
Miss Bennet, there seems to be a prettyish kind of little wilderness on one side of your lawn. I shall be glad to take a turn of it if you will favor me to do so.
Of course.
You can be at no loss, Miss Bennet, to understand the reason my journey hither.
Indeed, you are mistaken. I cannot account for the honor.
However insincere you may choose to be, you will not find me so. My character has ever been celebrated for its sincerity and frankness. I was told that not only your sister was on the point of being most advantageously married, but that you would, in all likelihood, be united with my own nephew, Mr. Darcy. Though I know it to be a scandalous falsehood, I have come to let you know my sentiments to you.
If you believed it to be such a falsehood, I wonder why you took the trouble of traveling so far.
To have the report universally contradicted, can you declare there is no foundation to it?
Your ladyship shall ask questions which I shall not choose to answer.
This is not to be borne.
Your ladyship has declared it impossible.
But your arts and your allurements may, in a moment of infatuation, make him forget what he owes to himself and to his family. You may have drawn him in.
If I have, I shall be the last person to confess it.
I am unaccustomed to such language as this, Miss Bennet. I am entitled to know all of his dearest concerns.
You are not entitled to know mine.
Mr. Darcy is engaged to my daughter. Now what have you to say?
Then you have no reason to suppose he would make an offer to me.
From his earliest hours, his mother and I declared the union, and he is destined for his cousin.
But what is this to me? What is it to me to know that his mother and aunt wished him to marry Mr. Bow?
Honor, decorum, prudence, nay, interest, forbid it. Your land will be a disgrace. You have neither family connections nor fortune. Your name shall never be mentioned by any of us.
These are heavy misfortunes. But the wife of Mr. Darcy would have no reason to repine.
Obstinate, headstrong girl! I've never been in the habit of brooking disappointment.
That will make your ladyship's situation much more pitiable, but it will have no effect on me.
Tell me, once and for all, are you engaged to him?
I am not.
And will you promise to never enter into such engagement?
I shall make no promise of the kind.
Not so hasty, if you please. To the objection I have another to add. I am no stranger to your sister's infamous elopement.
Lady Catherine,
a patched-up business at the expense of your father and uncle.
I must beg you return to the house.
Is such a girl to be my nephew's sister? Is her husband, who is the son of his late father Stuart, to be his brother? Heaven and earth, of what are you thinking? Are the shades of Pemberley to be thus polluted?
Honor, decorum, nay interest, have any means on me in the possible instance.
You are resolved to ruin him in all the opinions of his friends, and make him the contempt of the world against his claims of duty, honor, and gratitude?
These will have no claim on me. If the former were excited by me, of marrying me, the world in general would have too much sense to join in the scorn.
Very well. I shall now know how to act. Do not imagine that your ambitions will be gratified. I take no leave of you, and I send no compliments to your mother. I am seriously displeased.
Well, Lady Catherine not come in and rest herself.
She did not have it, she would go.
fine-looking woman, and prodigiously civil. She only came, I suppose, to tell us that the Collinses were well. I suppose she had nothing particular to say to you, Lizzie.
No, nothing particular, no.
Lizzie, I received a letter this morning that's astonished me. I did not know I had $2 on the brink of matrimony. Mr. Collins wrote me, saying, your daughter Elizabeth, as it is presumed, will no longer bear the name Bennet after her eldest sister has resigned it.
And the chosen partner of a fate may be reasonably looked up to as one of the most illustrious personages in this land.
Can you possibly guess, Lizzie, who is meant by this? Mr. Darcy, you see, is the man. Now, Lizzie, I seem to have surprised you. He's not rich, nor you're not diverted by it. But you don't seem to have liked the surprise.
Oh, I am excessively diverted, but it is so strange.
Yes, and that is what makes it so amusing. I mean, your pointed indifference and his perfect dislike makes it all so delightfully absurd.
Mr. Darcy is here, Miss Elizabeth, and most expressly to see you.
Miss Bennet.
Mr. Darcy, I have been a selfish creature. For fear of my own feelings, I have not thought how much I may be wounding yours. Let me thank you for your kindness to my sister. For the rest of my family to know, I would not have merely my own gratitude to express.
I am sorry, exceedingly sorry that you were informed of what may, in a mistaken light, have given you uneasiness. I did not think that Mrs. Gardiner was so little to be trusted.
You must not blame my aunt. Lydia's thoughtlessness first betrayed you to me. I must thank you again and again.
If you are to thank me, let it be for yourself alone. Your family owes me nothing. Much as I respect them, I feel I thought only of you. So, indeed, well, you are too generous to trifle with me. If your feelings are still what they were last April, tell me so at once. My feelings and affections remain unchanged, but one word from you will silence me forever.
Mr. Darcy, my feelings have undergone so material a change as the period you allude to as to your
present assurance.
Exactly.
I am.
You are?
Very much so. I believe my aunt has been to see you.
She has.
As you may know, my feelings are exactly contrariwise. I hope you spoke to her quite frankly.
Oh, you know enough of my frankness to believe me capable of that. After abusing you so abnormally to your face, I could have no scruple in abusing you to all your relations.
What did you say of me that I did not deserve? My previous behavior to you has merited the severest reproof. It has been unpardonable.
I think the conduct of both of us could be reproachable, but I hope we have both improved in civility.
As a child, I was taught what was right, but I was not taught to correct my temper. I was given good morals, but left to follow them only in pride and conceit. By you, I was properly humbled. I came to you without a doubt of my reception, but you showed me how insufficient were all my pretensions on how to please a woman worthy of being pleased.
I'm almost afraid of asking you what you thought of me when I came to Tenderley. You blamed us for coming.
No, I felt only the pleasure of surprise. My chief object at the time was to show you that all of your reproofs had been attended to, and how soon any other wishes introduced themselves, I can hardly say, but about 30 minutes or so after meeting you.
Other wishes?
Other wishes, yes.
And Mr. Bingley?
On the evening before my going to London, I told Mr. Bingley of all that had occurred to make my previous interference in his affairs seem absurd and impertinent. Moreover, I told him that I felt myself mistaken in supposing your sister was indifferent to him, and as I could see his affections toward her were unabated, I could feel no doubt of their happiness together.
Do you speak from your own observation, or merely my information last spring?
I had narrowly observed her, and I was convinced of her affection.
And what do you narrowly observe in me, Mr. Darcy?
That something, I am not sure what, is expected. What have I done?
Oh, no, thank you. You haven't yet learned to be laughed at, but it was too early to begin.
Excuse me, I must speak to your father.
Given him my consent, and I now give it to you if you are entitled to have him. However, I know your dispositions, and I'm neither be happy nor respectful unless you truly esteemed your husband.
I do esteem him, Father. He has grown exceptionally in my estimation. His affection is not the suspense of a day, but is held many, many months. He is the object of my choice.
Well, this is an evening of wonders indeed.
Good gracious! Lord bless me. Only think. Mr. Darcy! Who would have thought it? And it's really true? Oh, my sweetest! How great and rich you will be! What jewels and carriages you will have! Jane is nothing to it, nothing at all! 3 daughters married, 10,000 a year! Oh, Lord! What will become of me? I shall go distracted!
Now I'm quite happy, for you will be as happy as myself. Were it nothing but his love for you, I must have always esteemed him. But now is your husband and Bingley's friend. There can be no one besides yourself and Bingley more dear to me. Go, go.
And now, Mr. Darcy, pray continue.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming to our show tonight, but we have one little thing before we let you guys out.
We have more than one little thing, so before you guys do your little thing, I need some people to come up here with me on stage. I had some major help this year, which is really kind of out of my normal. Normally I try to do everything myself, and this year I actually had somebody who stepped up, actually a few somebodies who stepped up and did some wonderful help with me. If I could have Denise, please come up here to the stage. If you guys like all of our costumes, it's because she outfitted everybody. So I would really like to thank her for that. I could definitely not have done this without you.
Aw, how cute.
We also
I mean, I caught my butt, what, like half a dozen times?
She was always there, even when we needed them and they were on stage and they're like, help! So we really appreciate her. There's a couple other people, I think they're here in the house. I need the Richies to please come up here.
Guys.
Mr. and Mrs. Ritchie. If you like our wonderful set back here, Mr. Ritchie, and I do believe Mrs. No, didn't Mr. Murrow help? No, he didn't. Okay. I was thinking maybe he did, but anyway. Helena actually did most of our Tech Week food and that. She helped out with that. And Tim did our wonderful setup here. So I would like to thank them also. Also, if I could have Michelle please come up here. She's back there in the back hiding, trying to hide from me. But Michelle, which is Nick's mom, she had pretty much put everything together for our food for Tech Week. So we are literally here for probably till like 8:30. I think I get home at 9 o'clock, and she made it very possible for us to have some nutrition. So I really much appreciate that. Oh no, wait a minute. We need one more person up here on stage. Holly, I need you on stage. Holly's here somewhere. Where is she? I had to get a picture of this young man because he was Mr. Darcy. Well, I would like to present Mr. Darcy's picture to Mr. Darcy's mom. Okay, I'm done now, Savannah.
All right, so every year, us seniors get together and we do a gift for our director, and we gave Denise her flowers. Well, Candy, all these years you've been stuck with us, and we've stressed you out, and I'm actually shocked because she normally brings a pint of ice cream to practice and eats it in front of all of us. Doesn't share, but she eats it in front of all of us. So we decided for your gift, a dozen roses, because just your personality is so sweet and beautiful. And we actually put together a de-stressor basket. So, you got a fuzzy blanket in there, you got a Starbucks gift card, some fuzzy socks. You got a bunch of stuff in
I
there.
think you guys know I'm always cold. That's why
Yeah.
I'm now in this instead of a dressy sweater because I got cold.
And then we actually did a picture of all of us cats bowing. So, Chugs, you've got some memories to share?
Yeah, okay, so hello everybody, I'm Chase Chargoff. If you know anything about me, I've been a part of this program for 3 years now, because for my first year I was in the pit orchestra. But Candy and Ethan Mann decided to make me come out and do Beauty and the Beast my sophomore year. In Beauty and the Beast, I, along with a couple of these people back here, played animal servants. And part of our costume was these cute little leggings that Kylie Harbert made. And these cute little leggings were sewn together, and we had to use staples to staple together a design up against a piece of cardboard to imitate a wall. If any of you came to this show, you know what I'm gonna say. But my little legging caught on one of the staples.
Sure, it caught.
And I took a little tumble. I fell backwards and broke the entire set. And I stood there for a second and looked at it and was like, huh. So, scene ends, I'm off stage, and I disappear, like nobody can find me. And I'm in the office crying because I'm a mess. And I thought Candy, when she found me, was gonna take my neck and kill me on the cross. I was terrified of this woman. But when she did find me, she gave me a hug and told me to stop being a baby. Candy is one of the most genuine people you will ever meet in your entire life. She has given multiple people a passion for this because she stood with us through everything. Not just as a director, but as someone who we knew we could be there and talk to. So thank you, Candy, for everything.
Candy, you are like our mom. We are all such a...
No, I did that earlier.
No, yeah, I know you already had me rolling earlier, okay? You literally have just inspired us all.
All right, are we done with this emotional trash?
I like my emotional trash, okay?
Thank you all for coming.